From Zaza Pachulia changing the way the entire voting system works, to Jordan's colorful sneakers changing the entire boring dress code, here are some of the NBA's craziest forced rule changes. Starting with James Harden. Honestly, with the amount of controversy that this man has caused, I'm sure no one's surprised I'm talking about him. Don't get me wrong, Harden's a superstar through and through, and he's a deadly player, but that's not how it started out. No, to begin with, he was averaging less than 10 points per game. He only really took off when he started using a very annoying loophole to get himself to the free throw line again and again. And for the people that get mad about LeBron getting all the calls and being handed free throws, just remember that when Harden was using his little loophole, he was getting 42% more free throws than King James. What exactly was this loophole, you ask? Well, Harden basically used to force a foul by hooking the defender's arms under his own while he was trying to shoot. And I can't even be mad at the guy because it worked every time and he got free throw after free throw. You can probably guess that the NBA wasn't too happy with this though, and eventually they had enough. Just like that, the Harden rule was introduced, and players were no longer allowed to draw a foul by forcing the contact themselves. Now, before you judge Harden, he's not the only top player to use loopholes like this. In fact, one of the top 5 in the league is doing something similar to this even today. Yep, I'm talking about Kevin Durant. And KD is without a doubt one of the greatest and most versatile scorers the league has ever seen. So it's honestly kind of ridiculous that he feels the need to resort to the sort of tactics he sometimes uses to get to the free throw line. Unlike Harden though, Durant's method was a little more subtle. He used to force fouls by using a move called the rip through. The basic idea was that KD would purposely shoot the ball by swinging into a defender's arms to draw a foul. And it worked so well that even the fans thought it was unfair. Needless to say, the NBA had to step in because KD was pretty much unstoppable with this loophole, and they needed to do something to control him. Yep, the refs were pretty much handing the guy free throws, and they had no choice because the way KD was shooting was forcing genuine fouls. So the NBA stepped in and changed the foul from a shooting foul to a common foul. That way, players could no longer sneak onto the free throw line. Still, even without this hack, KD is pretty much unguardable, which makes this whole thing even funnier. Now, Durant's not the first player that was so good that something had to be done to limit him. Shaq was an invincible beast, and he was even more of a problem than KD. But the rule change that O'Neal forced went down a little differently. Shaq was so big and impossible to defend against that his opponents started using a loophole to stop the guy. Basically, as big and amazing as O'Neal was, he was absolute hot garbage when it came to shooting. So opposing teams came up with a pretty annoying strategy to make it impossible for the giant to steamroll over them and dunk the ball. They'd pretty much just foul him as soon as he was near the paint and force him onto the free throw line. As ridiculous as that is, it was definitely working, and Shaq got so angry that he threatened the commission. He told the commissioner that unless this very unfair tactic was punished, he was gonna start swinging the next time it happened. Now, while that didn't exactly work, the Hack-a-Shaq move was so blatantly stupid that fans booed their own teams for using it. Eventually, the NBA had to change the rules so that fouling away from the ball would give possession to the other team. And while this didn't stop the Hack-a-Shaq, it meant that whenever Shaq was fouled, he'd get possession of the ball. Shaquille's opponents just couldn't handle his dominance, and they had to try and bend the rules to stop him. And while that's impressive, there was one guy who was so good, the NBA was actively trying to make the game harder for him. I'm talking about the legendary Wilt Chamberlain. And for those of you that aren't aware of who this guy was, he's the man that put up a whopping 100 points in a single game. And just by the way, this is a record no one's ever even come close to surpassing. Wilt was a huge deal, and he defied all logic. He was so good that the NBA was forced to pretty much change everything about the the game to make it harder for Wilt to dominate. Yep, that in itself is a huge compliment. One of these rules states that shooters can't cross the free throw line till the ball touches the rim, because Wilt would just bounce it off the backboard and score dunks. They made offense interference rules to stop Wilt, to stop him from grabbing his own teammates' shots mid-air and dunking them while they were already inbound to the basket. And as insane as that already is, they even changed the dimension of the court itself. Yep, they widened the paint from 12 to 16 feet for the expressed purpose of keeping Wilt farther away from the basket. Now, all of the rule changes I've discussed so far were because of amazing players who were just too good. But that's not the only type of situation where the NBA was forced to change the rules. I mean, just look at Magic Johnson. The man was a legend and one of the all-time greats. But one of the rule changes the NBA made because of him was just absolutely ridiculous. It came out that the man had HIV, and some of the other players and a lot of the fans lost their marbles. Although, to be fair to them, HIV was something of a boogeyman back then, and no one knew a lot about the disease. Anyway, if you didn't know, this is where the NBA's no blood rule comes from. They made a rule to stop play if there was any blood on the court, so that no one would catch Magic's HIV. This wasn't the only time a rule change was made based on some special circumstances though. Zaza Pachulia's case, for example, was pretty out of the ordinary. And I'm not blaming you if you don't know who this guy is, but just for your information, he's won the NBA championship twice with the Warriors. Now, that's pretty insane, considering he was supposed to be a bench player. He managed to get more votes than some top-level superstars though, and he did it consistently, allowing him to secure a spot on the team. The NBA was obviously very confused and suspicious, and with a little digging, they found out something pretty wild. Zaza's entire home country, Georgia, was consistently voting for the guy. And this is what forced the huge fan voting rule change that essentially decreased the weight of the fan votes by 50%. As crazy as the rule changes I've talked about so far have been, there's one that I still need to cover. One that probably had the biggest impact on the league's whole aesthetic. Yep, I'm talking about Michael Jordan's dress code antics. And if you're a fan of the longer shorts and colorful sneakers that the stars of the league wear today, well, you can thank Jordan for that, because the NBA was pretty firm on its rules about the shorts, and players were only allowed to wear black and white sneakers. Jordan, though, being the legend that he was, decided he'd pay the $5,000 a game fine and wear his classic Jordans every game. And this is what eventually led the league to ease up and allow what we see today: colorful sneakers on every star, and every other guy coming out with their own shoe. This rule change was honestly one of the most important as far as the culture around the NBA is concerned. Well, there you have it. Those were the craziest instances of NBA players forcing rule changes in the league.